Hello, everyone. So today we are doing lesson 1.2, read and write numbers. Yesterday we talked about how we can take a number and put it into a place value chart. We talked about how there are digits 1 through 9, 0 through 9, but the place that you put it on the place value chart changes how much it's worth. It changes its value. So today we're going to talk about how we read those numbers, how we say them, and how we can write them. And there's different ways to write them out. Okay? So our essential question is, how can you read and write numbers through hundred thousands? Okay, let's take a look at this problem. The International Space Station uses 262,400 solar cells to change sunlight to electricity. And I want to pause here and just show you that this is something that we're going to be talking about today. I just read out how to say this number, and that's something that we are going to be talking about today. How can I look at this huge number and read that? Okay, so we are going to write this number in standard form, word form, and expanded form. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use a place value chart. Okay, remember this right here is the place value chart. So each group of 3 digits separated by a comma is called a period. Okay, so here's a digit, 2 digits, 3 digits. That is the ones period. And then we separate it by a comma. So every time you see one of these lines here, you're going to put a comma in your number. I'm going to make that really big. Let me use a big font size. There we go. Okay. Every time you see this line, you put a comma in your number. Okay? So each period has hundreds, tens, and ones. And we saw that yesterday. Hundreds, tens, ones. And then it repeats. Hundreds, tens, ones. The greatest place value position in the thousands period is hundred thousands. So, and when you get to hundreds, thousands, that is the biggest in that period. Okay? So take a look here. Every time there are 3 digits, you put a comma, and it's a new period. These are the ones period. That means that it is exactly the number that it says here. There's ones, and then tens, and then hundreds. Then it goes into the thousands period. Okay? That means it's 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. And if it were to go on this way, it would go into the millions period. Okay? So we're going to take this number right here, and we're going to place it in the place value chart below. Okay? And just like we said yesterday, we're going to start on the right and go to the left. You'll find that we do this a lot in math. We start on the right and go to the left, opposite of the way we read. So I'm going to start with a 0, and I'm going to place it in the ones column. The next 0 is in the tens column. This 4 is in the hundreds column. And this is the first period. Now we're going into the thousands period. So this 2 is in the 1,000s column. This 6 is in the 10,000 column. And this 2 is in the 100,000 column. Okay? Now, once I've figured that out, I can write it in the different forms. Okay? So this number has 2 periods, the thousands period and the ones period. And to write it in standard form, you would just write it exactly how it's written here, exactly how I wrote it in the chart. 262, comma, 400. But that's not how you would read it. The way you would read it here in word form, I would have to say each name of the column it's in. 200,000, 60. Well, I guess we wouldn't read it right out like that because I would read it as one period. That's why we have it. So for a second, I want you to just pretend that the word thousand doesn't exist, okay? Read it as 262. And then this comma says thousand, okay? 262,400. You read each period on its own, and then the comma says the name. 262,400. And so that's how I would write it out in words. 262,400. Next, I'm going to write it out in expanded form. And the way that I do this is I take each column and I turn the rest into zeros. And then I do the next column and I turn the rest into zeros, and so on. So for example, here, there's a 2 in the 200,000. So I'm going to write it out 200, comma, 000, 200,000. Then I'll go to my next column, 60, comma, 000, and write it as 60,000. I go to my next column, 2, comma, 000. I would write it as 2,000. My next column has a 4 in it, and the rest I would write as 00 and write 400. Now because there's nothing in the tens and nothing in the ones, I wouldn't add that on. If we were to add these together, it would add up to this number, 262,400. So let's put this into use, okay? Most of your questions are going to give you one kind of form, and they want you to put it into the other kinds of forms. So in this example, it starts off in word form. It says 92,170. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to borrow this place value chart from up here. And that's going to help me place this so that I can get the standard form. Okay? All right, let's place it in this place value chart. 92,000. Okay? So before it gets to this comma, because the comma says 1,000, it has 92. So it has a 9 here in the tens place and a 2 in the ones place. Okay? 92,170. So a 1 in the hundreds place, 100, and then 70. 70 means 7 tens. So that'll be in my tens place. And then I don't have any ones, so I'll put a 0. Don't forget to put a 0 if there's nothing in that column. So 92,170. So let's write that out in standard form. 92,000, that comma says 1,000, 170. Okay? Now I need to write it out in expanded form. And they already started it off for us. So they put in 90,000 for the 9 in the 10,000s place. They put a 2,000 for the 2 in the thousands place. The next column has a 1 in the hundreds place. So I'm going to write a 1 and then a 0 here and a 0 here. So I'll be writing 100. And then they put a 70 for the 7 in the tens place. And that's the number in expanded form. So let's try this example, okay? So they have it written in standard form, 200,000 and 7. Okay? So if it would help you to read this out to put it into the place value chart, let's go ahead and do that. Okay? It helps me read it out as well. So I'll start on the right. The 7 goes in the ones place. The next digit is a 0. The next digit is a 0. The next digit is a 0. Whoa. I don't know what happened. Let me just write in here and maybe it'll bring it back. There we go. Okay. Our next digit is also a 0. And the last digit here is a 2. Okay, so now I'm going to use this chart to read it out so that I can say it in word form. This, if I just block off the thousands for a second and I just read this period, it says 200. And then this comma says 1,000. So here's my first word, 200,000. Okay, so I've got that part. I got the first period, 200,000, 7. There's no hundreds or tens, so there's just 7 left. So to say this number, I would say 200,007. To write it in expanded form, I'm going to look at each column and look at its digit, and then turn the rest into zeros. So here in the hundred thousands column, I have a 2, and the rest I'm going to put 0, 0, comma, 0, 0, 0. I'm going to turn the rest into zeros. 200, comma, 0, 0, 0. Okay? The rest of my columns have zeros in them, so I don't have to put them in for expanded form, except for this last column has a 7, which they already put on there. And that's how I would write it in expanded form. Okay, if you feel comfortable enough to go on and try to do the work, you can totally do that. If you want to see a few more examples, I'm going to go over a few more examples now. Okay? All right, here's an example of some of the questions you'll see on your homework. How can you use place value and period names to read and write 324,904 in word form? So here we're just explaining the process. And you would just explain how you would put it onto the place value chart and then read it by period, and the comma says the word 1,000. Okay? Here's another example of what you'll see. It'll have the number written in one form, and you have to write it in the 2 other forms. Remember that there are 3 different forms, and if you need to remember, look at the book. It has it written here. There's standard form, which is just the number written out, word form, where I write it in words, and expanded form, where I take apart the pieces and put plus signs in between them. This one is in word form. So I need to write it in standard form, and I need to write it in expanded form. Okay? So first, to write it in standard form, I'm just writing it like the number. So let's read this out. 408,000. That's the first period because 1,000 is the comma. 408. 408,000. The comma says 1,000. 17. Now I can't just write 17 because there needs to be 3 numbers in my last period. If I just have 17, that means there's nothing in the hundreds place, so there's a 0 there. 17 at the end. Then I'm going to write this as expanded form, which means I'm going to take it apart piece by piece. Let's start here. We're starting with the 4, and I'm going to turn the rest of these digits into 0. So I'm going to have 4, 0, 0, comma, 0, 0, 0. 4, 0, 0, comma, 0, 0, 0. There's my first piece. We're going to put a plus sign. My next piece has nothing, so I skip it. My next piece has an 8, and then 0, 0, 0. Don't forget the comma. 8, comma, 0, 0, 0. Plus sign. My next column has a 0. There's nothing there. I don't need to add it. The next column has a 1, and I'll turn the other digit into a 0. 1 and 0. Okay, and my last column has a 7 and nothing else. So I took apart its pieces. The 400,000 I took out, the 8,000, the 10, and the 7. And if I were to add this all together, it would add up to 408,017. Okay, so most of your problems will look like this. You'll have it in one form, and you need to write it in the other forms. So I am going to do one more example of this, and then I'll do one different type of question that you might see. So here, this number is written in standard form, just like the number would look like. So I need to write it in the two other forms. I need to write it in word form, and I need to write it in expanded form. Remember that word form is just writing it out in words the way you would say it. So I need to look at my first period before the comma, and the first period says 65, and then the comma says 1,000. 65,000. Okay. After the comma, it says 58. 65,058. Now, if you don't know how to spell all of the numbers, that's fine. Sound it out. Do the best that you can. I'm looking for if you know how to say it, not how to spell it. If you want to look up how to spell it, that's totally fine. But don't worry about spelling it right, just as long as I can read it and know what you meant. Okay, expanded form. I'm taking it apart piece by piece. I am looking at the first column, and it has a 6, and the rest I'm going to turn into 0. 6, 0, comma, 0, 0, 0. 6, 0, comma, 0, 0, 0. Plus sign. My next column has a 5, and then after the comma, there's 0, 0, 0. 5, comma, 0, 0, 0. Oops, I did a period. Okay. There's nothing in the next column. My next column is a 5, and I'll turn the other digit into a 0. 5, 0. And then my last column has an 8. This is just another way of saying this digit is worth 60,000. This digit is worth 5,000. This digit is worth 50, and this digit is worth 8. Okay. Here's the other kind of question you'll find. It says use the number 145,973. Write the name of the period that has the digits 145. So there's two periods because there's a comma here. There's this digit, there's two periods. There's the ones period and the thousands period. So the 145 is in the thousands period. Okay. Write the name of the period that has the digits 973. So if they're over here on the right, they're in the ones period. Okay. Write the digit in the 10,000s place. Okay, so let me count this out. Ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. The digit in the 10,000s place is 4. Remember, digits are only 0 through 9. So it's asking what number or digit 0 through 9 is in that place on the place value chart. Then it says write the value of the digit 1. Remember, the value is how much it's worth. Okay, so a digit is 0 through 9, but the value is how much it's worth. Let's see what place it's in. Ones, tens, thousands. Sorry, I skipped one. Ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, ten thousands, hundred thousands. The 1 is in the hundred thousands place. So that digit 1 is worth 100,000. Okay. I hope this was helpful. I will be putting the math on the spot video if you want some extra help. You'll be going to Think Central, click on To Do, and do 1.2 student work. There's 10 problems to work on. If you have any questions, please message me. And I hope you have a great day.